Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you to descend into darkness with a chilling anthology of horror stories. This is episode 41. Let the nightmare begin. Feast of Shadows. My story? I will tell you my story. It is a cautionary tale about the wiles of drug abuse. I wish that my story was as simple as most. I wish that I could tell you that I was arrested for possession or that I was shot in a failed drug deal. While these types of things are terrible, my story is far worse. I will tell it to you and then let you decide. It all started when I was young, somewhere around the age of 15 or 16. I know that most children at that age experiment with drugs, mostly marijuana. I was introduced to it by my friend Derek. He came to school one day with the typical red, droopy eyes, giggling about next to nothing. As soon as I saw him, I knew something was up. "Derek," I whispered sharply, leaning towards his desk. "What the fuck is up with you, dude? You don't look right." "Aw, man, Liam. That's me, by the way. You just don't know, dude. I'm so fucking high, man." Then he started giggling like a 2-year-old at a fart joke. "Dude, seriously?" I shot back, completely unaware that this wasn't his first time. "Yeah, Liam, dude. Seriously, you gotta smoke some of this shit with me, bro." I never really even thought about drugs until that moment. To me, drugs were something that I knew about, but had never experienced up close and personal. Kind of like a foreign country, $1 million, or some crazy debilitating disease. I knew they existed, but only in the most vague of senses. Somehow, the prospect of trying drugs excited me. It made me feel rebellious, and for whatever dumb reason, cool. Well, I trailed off, becoming unsure of my decision. "What kind of shit are we talking about, Derek?" "Crack meth, what?" He laughed crazily at this and said, "Nah, man, it's just a little weed is all." Well, what could be the harm in that, right? I mean, there were so many potheads during the 60s and 70s, and they survived. What could possibly go wrong? "Fuck yeah, Derek. Let's do this. After school, meet me down at the abandoned covered bridge just outside the town limits. We'll blaze it up," air quotations as they say, and that, unbeknownst to myself or Derek, was the beginning of our ends. Needless to say, after that night, I was hooked. The buzz was so good that I had to have more, and Derek, well, good old Derek knew just where to get it. From that day forward, I was ahead. No other way to say it. If I wasn't smoking or high, I was asleep. Derek and I smoked together so many times since that day that I couldn't count them on a damn abacus. From that first time until now, almost 20 years later, we smoked together, all through college and beyond. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until about 3 months ago that Derek and I stopped smoking together. He always had to connect. No matter what, when, or where, Derek could get the best of the best. That is, until the accident, 3 months ago. After that fateful night, I never saw Derek again. Well, that's not entirely true. I saw him at his funeral, in his casket. So pale, so still, so dead. Derek had been in a car accident. He was high and, well, for the first month or so after the accident, things were fine. I still had a fairly large amount of weed stashed, and I just smoked by myself. I told myself that I was doing it in Derek's honor, but let's be real. I was doing it because that's what addicts do, get high. It didn't take long, though, until the fun had started to drain out of it, and I realized that I had two very huge problems. First, my addiction, and second, I was almost out of fucking weed. Well, toward the end of that month, I think it was July or whatever, toward the end of that first month after Derek died, I realized that I was running extremely low on my favorite herb. So, I did what anyone else would do. I called up a few old friends from college in hopes to score some more, as Derek would have put it. I ran into a whole bunch of nothing. Just about everyone that I called from the old college days had moved on. Most of them told me things like, "Man, I quit smoking that shit years ago," or "Dude, I have a fucking family now." So now what? Just so happens that it didn't take long for me to find an answer to that question. I live in a small but quite busy city, so cheap as I am, I walk the 3 or 4 blocks to the subway and ride to work. On the way to the subway station, about a half block from my crummy little studio apartment, is an alleyway. This particular alleyway is always crowded with vagrants. After my first few months of passing by, they became part of the city backdrop, and I could almost predict their motions. Begging for change one day, asking for food the next, and so on and so on. That was until the day after I ran out of weed. I was making my way home one dreary and overcast evening when I noticed a new face among the crowd of beggars. He seemed older, more haggard than the rest. He sat just outside of the alleyway, leaning against the brick front of one of the buildings. In his lap was a worn and stained cardboard sign asking one simple question. "Got weed?" "No, but I fucking wish, old man," I thought as I trudged along. Boy, oh boy, do I ever. As if picking up on this, the old man stood up. I could see that he had trouble doing it too. It took him a full 30 seconds or more to pull himself up from the sidewalk. I had almost passed him by and finished my journey home until I felt his bony old fingers gripping my arm. Such strength for such an old and gnarled hand. It froze me dead in my tracks. Before I could even turn my head, I heard him whisper in my ear, "Well, do you there, Sonny?" His breath, hot and burning against my cheek, bringing with it a stench of something dead, something sour. "Do ya got weed?" Before I had even known I would say it, I replied, "No, but I got the need for the weed, old man." "Good. Follow me." He croaked in my ear. "Step into my quaint little office," he said with a maniacal chuckle. At that, he pulled me by my arm into the dark, wet precipice that was the alleyway, his office. "Look, mister," I started, slightly scared, but curious just the same. "I ain't got much money, and I ain't about to be dealing for nobody, so hang on there, son," he said with a shit-eating grin. "I ain't pulling your leg none. I got some of the finest weed this world has ever seen." "Really?" I asked, grinning myself. "So what's a guy like me got to do to get that good, air quotations, from a guy like you?" He barked laughter at this. "You who dash," he cleared his throat. "Heads, always make me laugh with your nonsensical names, fair stuff. It's quite simple, actually," he paused. "Just prick your finger and drop a couple drops of your life's blood on this here paper, and you got all that you could ever want." Me being a man completely devoid of any kind of religious pretenses, I didn't hesitate. So, all I gotta do is drop a little blood on that old-ass piece of dust you call paper, and I get some good shit? Yep, best shit that you'll ever see, and as much as you could ever want. Huh, shit, sign me up, old man. And with that, my fate was sealed. I did as he had asked and pricked my finger. Once I saw the blood beating up, I squeezed the tip and was careful to drop just 2 drops on his stupid old paper. After that, he handed me a big-ass sack of what looked like the dankest, most wonderful weed a guy like me could ask for. I couldn't wait to get home and give a test run. As I turned to walk away, the old man called after me. "Thanks for your business, boy. Come back anytime, and tell your friends to stop on by too." Then he cackled and slapped his leg as if he'd just told the funniest joke known to man. Thinking back on it now, I guess he had. I practically sprinted the rest of the way home, unable to curb my enthusiasm at getting high on what looked to me like the best weed I'd ever smoke. I rushed into my apartment, slammed the door behind me, and ran to my bedroom to get Big Bertha. Big Bertha was a big-ass homemade bong that Derek and I had made somewhere during our journey as stoners. She had made her way to my place one night after Derek got so baked that he couldn't even remember his address. From that point on, Bertha had stayed with me. Derek said something along the lines of, "It's cool, man. We made her what she is together. She just chose you in the end. It's totally cool." I broke off a small chunk of one bud and dropped in Bertha's empty bowl. "Well, baby, here we go." And with that, I put the pedal to the metal and went for a ride. What a fucking ride indeed. I had only taken 2 gigantic hits before it all got intense. As I sat there, coughing up a lung, metaphorically speaking, of course, and desperately trying to breathe, the world changed. First, it was like any other batch of pot. Everything got all bright and shiny, almost as if there were more light in the room. Then, as per usual, everything seemed to become more real, more meaningful. As if, until this moment, life had meant nothing, and now, somehow, it all made sense. This is the point at which I normally say, "Fuck it, Derek, I'm not high enough yet," and would proceed to take a few more enormous bong hits. But that was not the case today. Nah man, come on dude, just sit and ride the wave with me bro. And as I tried to comprehend what I just heard, I could see a figure sitting next to me on my couch, just within my peripheral vision. I screamed and jumped. "What's up bro?" Derek asked, all dopey and slow like his old self, you know, before he died. "Dude," I croaked, simultaneously rubbing my eyes and questioning my sanity. "Oh, don't mind me, man," he said all nonchalant like, I know, I look like hell, right?" "Derek," I whispered, "you're dead, man. Months dead. You can't possibly be here." "Oh, nah, man," he chuckled. "It's cool, bro. The old man told me you needed me, so here I am." I couldn't even try to begin to find any words to speak to the apparition that sat on my couch. It looked just like my dead friend Derek, but more dead. His skin was a muted gray color, and there were patches of it missing. His hair was faded to a light gray, white in some places with clumps of it missing. The skin of his face had dried to the point that it had started to pull away from his teeth and his eyes. It was like talking to something between a zombie and a mummy. "Look, man, I just came to tell you that you're in a bad way," the Derek thing said. "Wadash," I gasped. "What do you mean?" I asked in a mix of panic, confusion, and fear. "Well, bro, it's like this," he started. "The old man told me to come here and guide you, but I'm not sure that I trust him." "So then why come Derek?" "For you, bro," he laughed. "Why else?" "Derek," I sighed. "Look, man, it's been hard getting over your death, and I just don't think—" "Yeah," Derek urged. "I just don't think that I can handle this right now. I appreciate you coming to my rescue, but what, Liam? Say it, man. But I need you to go. I need you to go, Derek, so that I can grieve and mourn your loss. I love you like a brother, and I always will, but I just need you to go." "All right, bro," the Derek thing said, "but I'm sure I'll be back. Call if you need me, bro. Love you." At that, I awoke to the sun beaming through the windows, the alarm clock braying its wake-up calls and showing the late hour of 7 a.m. Shit, I had to be on the subway in 15 minutes, and I wasn't even dressed. I jumped up off the floor, "What the fuck?" and ran to the door. I sprinted all the way to the subway station and barely slid in between its closing doors. I had made it. The rest of my day went pretty well as expected, but my mind kept going back to that beautiful bag and Derek. On the walk home, my mind was completely focused on the bag. Nothing else mattered to me. I had to get home and get my fix. When I reached my building, I leaped up the stairs to my apartment and slammed the door behind me without a second thought. Before I even settled in, I had Bertha in one hand and the bag in the other. Next thing I knew, I was off to see the wizard. The buzz hit me just the same as before. It felt so wonderful, so right, so comforting. This time Derek didn't show up, but something did. Hunger. Intense hunger. Bright, red, and consuming my mind. I just had to eat anything. I stormed my kitchen like a madman out for blood. Before I knew what was happening, I was sitting on my couch, crouched over what was left of a bucket of chicken from 2 or 3 days ago, chomping and slurping. In the middle of my gorging, a sound broke my frenzied concentration. It was Derek. "Dude, I told you," he said, dismayed. "What?" I mumbled through a mouthful of cold, greasy chicken, and was that bone? "Dude, I told you he couldn't be trusted." With that, he disappeared, and I continued to eat. The only thing that seemed to matter in this moment, food. Next thing I knew, it was morning once again. This went on for the next few weeks. I would come home, smoke, eat, and wake up. I started to think that the Derek thing was just a figment of my imagination. He hadn't shown up in a multitude of days, but my bag was getting low. That night, on my walk home from work, the bag on my mind, I saw the old man again. This time, however, he looked younger, less haggard, more feral. "So, sonny boy, what did ya think?" "Man," I started. "Shit blew my fucking mind, man." "I told you," he smirked, "but you ain't seen nothing yet." Then he slid me another bag. "But I tried." He shook his head. "I told you," he said, "come back anytime you need more." I headed home after that. sure that I had the greatest hookup to ever exist and ready to smoke the biggest bowl I could pack. I did just that. Why God? Why did I do just that? This time, the hunger was unbearable. I didn't know how in the world I would ever make it stop. Just looking at the contents of my fridge, freezer, and cupboards, it didn't seem possible. Then Derek showed up, only this time. He looked more dead, more drained. What could have happened? Bro, the Derek thing croaked. Derek, I shouted, moving toward him. Long time no see, man. What's up? Oh, I just came to tell you something, the Derek thing sighed. What's up, man? You remember that old lady down the hall? Yeah, Derek, I remember Ms. Hallberg or something like that. Remember when you moved in and she brought you those delicious brownies? Fuck yeah, man, I said, remembering their moist, gooey centers. Just saying. Then the Derek thing disappeared. After that, I couldn't stop thinking about Ms. Hallberg's awesome homemade brownies. Just the thought of them made my saliva run and my stomach growl. When I say growl, I mean growl. Like an angry dog protecting its owner growl. I would do anything to get those brownies. At that thought, I decided that I would just mosey on down the hall and see if I could score some. I left my apartment at about 8:30 and headed down the hall. I rang her doorbell and waited as patiently as I could muster. Ms. Hallberg came to the door and looked through her peephole. Yes, she trailed off. Ms. Hallberg, it's me, Liam, from down the hall. Oh, hi, Liam. Is everything all right? Yes, ma'am, I said, the hunger in my stomach gnawing at my very soul. Well then, son, how can I help you? Well, ma'am, I said, manufacturing a chuckle. I was just thinking about your wonderful homemade brownies, and I figured. Liam, I figure I might stop on by and beg you for some. If you have any, I smiled. You're in luck, my boy, she said with a smile in her voice. I just made a batch last night. Come on in, and I'll let you have some with a cup or two of tea. Maybe we could even sit a spell and shoot the breeze. She said this last with a slight upturn in tone, indicating a question, as she took the chain off of her door. Miss Hallberg, I would be honored, but I must tell you, I'm oh so very hungry. Miss Hallberg, I would be honored, but I must tell you, I'm oh so very hungry. Echoes of the final hour. Sunday. Ethan Ward sat at his computer desk. The lights in his room were off, and the only thing adding any luminescence to his greasy, dirty face was the bright screen of his laptop. This had been his day. Another day of sitting down in his squeaky chair forgetting to shower, or rather preferring not to, and wasting away mindless hours of his life browsing the internet. A tall, fully grown man walked side to side on Ethan's computer screen. He had darker skin, and his black hair was slicked back. The man was in a dark apartment by the looks of it. A dimly lit room with an indistinguishable painting on the back wall, just above his unmade bed. He wore wrinkled pajamas, as if he had just woken up to film this video, and his sweaty face gave the impression that he clearly did not care how he presented himself to the internet. Ethan knew why. He leaned in closer as if he was preparing for what was coming next. The man leaned in closer to the camera. The webcam adjusted to his nearing face and produced a clear picture of the gentleman. His lips moved as he stared just below the camera at his computer screen, obviously whispering some important words to the thousands of onlookers that would see this, but the man's production had no audio. Ethan clenched his fist and licked his lips briefly. He knew what was coming next. The sweaty man tightened his face and shut his eyes for a moment. A single tear squeezed its way out of the man's tightly closed eyelid and rolled down his cheek. Another inaudible whisper to the camera, and the man stood up and returned to his standing position, this time with a pistol in his right hand. This was the sixth time Ethan had watched this video. He had a rather intriguing obsession with it. The man's face, the last tear, and of course the end. Ethan always loved the end. He had replayed the endings of not just this video, but many before it. In fact, for the past several years, Ethan had been looking for endings just like this, and this one especially interested him. Ethan wanted to go into the bloody body lying on the rough carpet of the man's poorly kept apartment. He wanted to feel the man's final emotions before he made the decision to pull the trigger. What did the bullet feel like? What was the feeling in a man after the bullet tore through his lively and healthy brain? Did he lose consciousness immediately, or did he slowly fade out of sense and reality as the blood left his skull? The man had slumped over and fell immediately. Did that mean he was already unconscious, or did he simply lose his motor skills? Did he immediately regret pulling the trigger, or was there not enough time to think? Plenty of these questions circulated through Ethan's curious little mind, but he didn't have the power to answer them. It was getting quite late, and he wanted at least a generous 5 hours of sleep before school the next day. As Ethan slept, he dreamt up answers to the questions that had circulated in his mind for so long. He dreamt up a world where death took all men back in time before they were killed. Then, they had time to change the path of events that rendered them dead before. It was a curious dream, but for a boy as imaginative as Ethan, it was nothing out of the ordinary. Monday, Ethan arose from his bed to a bright sun. A hushed radio announcer read a traffic report. A fender bender on Magnolia Road is causing a delay of 5 to 10 minutes. The radio was barely audible, definitely too quiet to have woken him up. He angrily turned his alarm upward toward his barely open eyes. 8:40, another day where he had foolishly overslept. He had missed the bus, and his parents were long gone at their jobs. Ethan grunted. His parents had completely left without checking on him. He couldn't recall seeing them for the past several days. If he had ended up like the man from the video the night before, his parents may not have found out for weeks. Certainly, they would notice a smell coming from his room after the bacteria began to take over. He gathered his books, put them in his backpack, and marched out the front door. A cold wind slammed into his face, drying out his eyes and skin. He trekked through a 3-inch layer of snow down his front yard onto the sidewalk. He walked down the road as a morning wind whipped into his face and blew snow from the ground into his eyes. He pondered for a moment what freezing to death would be like, a long and horrible experience of pain, and then the much-belated loss of pain towards the end. When a person moves that tiny finger muscle and pulls the trigger, there is no going back, but a man can recover from nearly freezing to death if he can accept his body with a few less limbs. 8th grade. The children are mean, the teachers are strict, and the real future planning begins. Ethan hopped up the large stairs at the front of his school. Surely students could see him all bundled up and miserable from the windows on the side of the building. But Ethan didn't care if he was being watched. He would be in this school as long as the government required that he be educated. He didn't need friends, and he didn't care to try to enjoy these years he had to spend with the brainless ingrates that paraded through the hallways showing off their expensive clothing and flaunting their undesirable personalities. He sat alone, he talked to no one, and this is how he intended to spend his life as long as he needed to. Ethan entered the room in the middle of his teacher's lecture. He loudly shuffled to the other side of the class and sat down in his seat, right in front of Noah Briggs. The teacher continued her speaking, pretending not to notice the 6th time her student had been late. Something was clearly wrong with his personal life, and she supposed that these problems should be addressed in private, not in front of the congregation of annoying, nosy creatures that sat before her. Ethan quietly sat, listening to the kid behind him suck in air. Noah Briggs may have been the closest thing to a friend Ethan could account for. Still, Ethan had little desire to affiliate with someone so acne-ridden, bad-smelling, and worthless as Noah Briggs. Noah was a quiet student, and Ethan knew very well why. His mother died of leukemia only 2 months ago, and the compassionate students at the school were kind enough to alienate him from their pretentious cliques when he became emotional. Ethan had mentally sifted through Noah's psychology plenty of times. Maybe his depression from the traumatic experience truly made him a boring and dry person to be around. Thus, the friends he had were quick to abandon him and let him sort out his emotional problems. Deep inside, However, Noah desperately needed a friend, and Ethan could be that friend. Of course, he was still a sad, pathetic weakling, and Ethan would much rather just let him cry about his unfortunate loss. Why these fools loved each other so strongly, only to be let down when they pass, Ethan would never understand. In the coming weeks, Noah might move that muscle in his finger and hear that click of the trigger, and if Ethan was lucky, he would be able to hear the bang from his room 4 houses down. When school ended, Ethan walked home quickly, avoiding conversation with any of his fellow humans. He sped down the hill of his school ground and made his way up the snowy sidewalk to his home. With a key hidden in his backpack, he unlocked the deadbolt and snuck inside. His green door shut, muting the heavy winds outside, and he climbed up the stairs to his room. He pulled off his backpack and coat, threw them on the floor in the middle of the carpet, and fell into his computer chair. Quickly shaking his computer mouse left and right, Ethan awoke his computer and clicked on the bookmarks icon on his browser. He had collected quite a stash of disturbing and frightening websites since he received his first computer. Ethan frequented such websites, and he could navigate them with his eyes closed. Each site had an impressive amount of precisely the videos he was looking for: murders, traumatic injuries, and his personal favorites, suicides. Ethan's first indulgence was a video he had seen many times before. A young, attractive teenage girl with bleach blonde hair and expensive school clothing was speaking directly to her camera. Tears rolled down her face, disrupting the symmetrical bliss of her mascara. Black streaks on her face made it halfway down her cheek before she wiped them off with the back of her hand. Ethan enjoyed the video because it had one thing he loved: sound. Sound brought out the best of each video. The pistols bang, the people's last words, the air escaping from the person's lungs after the ending, and of course the blood spilling out of an open wound like water pouring onto the hot pavement from a hose. In this case, Ethan was able to hear the girl frantically spill her inner sadness to the camera and reveal the horrible instances of her recent breakup. She whispered one last statement: "I don't want it, but I can't." Her idea ran dry, and she shut her eyes, had a spurt of angry sobbing, and stood up unable to express her sentence. She turned, walked off screen for a moment, and returned to the center of the screen with a belt. The girl eagerly attached the belt to an above-screen ceiling fan, formed a makeshift noose with a hanging portion, and set a white wooden chair directly underneath her masterpiece. She stood on the chair with 2 steps and gracefully set her head in the loop. Ethan clenched his fist and licked his lips. The girl, crying loudly now, made an effort to take a step backward and pull her head out of the noose for a moment of thought. She probably would have pondered, is this really how I want to die? Or am I really going to kill myself over this? Or what is this going to prove? She didn't ponder these things, however, because she slipped. Ethan grabbed his knees tightly with his sweaty hands and leaned in to watch. Her thin, tall body fell downward. Her hair flew over her face, and she screamed and choked trying to set her feet back up on the chair. She squirmed like an animal in a slaughterhouse, flailing her legs up and backwards toward the wooden, white chair. This caused her body to swing back and forth, which Ethan thought as quite humorous. He longed to be in her room and really see her choke and cough, and swing around with the thick, leather belt fastened tightly around her neck, causing her face to turn red and purple right before his eyes. This girl was still very afraid of death, and although she produced the means of killing herself, she probably was not going to go through with it. Gravity had a different plan for her, however, and her futile attempts at undoing her mistake were nothing more than a silly dance now. Ethan tried to imagine the pain and irony of having the life literally choked out of a person by their own creation, especially after they have changed their mind. Her silly joke suddenly became all too real, and she surely was not prepared for an actual chance of death. What a stupid girl. She had let herself love another, and when the love was lost, so was her will to live. Her life was like a pile of dirt surrounding the roots of a plant. When the plant was pulled out upward from the pot, so was all of the soil, clinging hopelessly to the roots, and only an empty pot lay behind. The empty pot was quite easy to see. It was hanging by a belt in the middle of her room. Tuesday. Ethan had gotten no more than an hour of sleep the night before. He had watched hours of endings, from hangings and trigger pullings to car crashings and wrist slashings. He even found a video of what looked to be a government agent held captive in a hostile facility, most likely from the Cold War. When the interrogator turned to select his next instrument of torture, the man popped a cyanide pill in his mouth. A small amount of cyanide with a glass shell and rubber coating could be bitten into, and the liquid swallowed. Cyanide gas would form within the host's stomach and cause death within a minute. Ethan always pondered these. How could a man be so honorable to his country that he willingly would end his life forever? What point is it to be honorable if your consciousness and self-gratification end in the process? What were the man's final thoughts? Did he regret swallowing the deadly liquid, only to realize that it was already working to kill him, and he had no way of preventing it? Was it a painful feeling to have a toxic gas form in one's stomach? Once again, Ethan's questions would never truly be answered. He did not possess the ability to communicate with the dead, and as much as he begged God each day, he would never be able to ask them how love and honor could have ceased their existence. Ethan slowly rose out of bed and squinted at the green blur emitting from his alarm clock. After a few seconds of a changing blur in his eyes, he could make out the clock. 5:30. He was on time for once. With a lazy hunch in his back, he crept over to the window and pulled apart the black curtains. Light entered the room as if it were burning away the cold darkness from the night. Snow was blowing wildly across his window, and a heavy, white fog ensured that nothing farther than 4 feet away could be seen outside. He pulled the blinds closed and left his room. Ethan tiredly shuffled down the carpeted stairs of his home and looked into the garage. His parents' cars were gone. Apparently, they must have left before the blizzard began, or, knowing their stupidity, left in the middle of it. Ethan shuffled into the living room and flipped on the television. The news showed a blonde meteorologist and a Doppler radar. A mass of pink and white slowly worked its way across the screen behind the woman, right over Ethan's town. With a storm like this, school would surely be canceled. Ethan shut off the television and headed back upstairs to his room. He heaved himself on his computer chair and opened his internet browser for another go, hoping for a beheading or at least a bloody amputation of some sort. He traveled through his usual grind, checking the latest uploads on the bookmark sites he collected. Too tired to discern which ones he'd checked recently, he clicked on the first bookmark. A black screen with cursive, red writing appeared before him. Ethan had always been a fan of this site. Many of the videos were in high definition and had sound. The videos were sorted by types of deaths, from hangings to bizarre and rare tragedies. Ethan spent most of his time worming his way through the suicide, hanging section, but he would often check the famous suicide pistol videos when he was in a more brutal mood. Something was very strange about the site this time. It was not its contents, nor its creepy nature, but a recent change that puzzled Ethan. Whenever he moved his mouse towards the top of the screen, a small link would light up white in the midst of the blackness of the page. Obviously, whoever programmed this website was unaware that the link's color was the same as the site's background. Ethan glanced at the link and decided to disregard it and move on to his usual videos. He then stopped, having just realized what the link had said. Real-time suicide. Live feed. Ethan's eyes widened. A real suicide? Live? Who would coordinate their lives, ending with a website? Who would literally plan their death on a certain date at a certain time? Ethan sat for 30 seconds, just staring blankly at the computer screen. He could see each individual pixel making up the small lettering of the white highlighted link on the webpage. Something seemed very wrong here, but Ethan was used to the very wrongs of life. At last, the quiet of the room was broken. Click. 319, Honey Tree Lane was a normal home. The architecture fit well with the rest of the street's houses. The sidewalk had the same curvy path unique to the rest of the neighborhood, and sometimes the snow piled above the entire lawn, leaving a river-looking indent in the snow leading up to the house. The only difference was that if one were to take the river path of 319, they would surely not be pleased with what they found inside. Ethan's assumptions had been fairly correct. A few weeks had passed, and still his parents hadn't noticed his body lying on the floor, knife in his throat, and his computer forever showing the live suicide, with his webcam just above the glowing monitor. 319, Honey Tree Lane was a normal home. The architecture fit well with the rest of the street's houses. The sidewalk had the same curvy path unique to the rest of the neighborhood, and sometimes the snow piled above the entire lawn, leaving a river-looking indent in the snow leading up to the house. The only difference was that if one were to take the river path of 319, they would surely not be pleased with what they found inside. Ethan's assumptions had been fairly correct. A few weeks had passed, and still his parents hadn't noticed his body lying on the floor, knife in his throat, and his computer forever showing the live suicide, with his webcam just above the glowing monitor. The forgotten sprint. Let me begin by saying that I absolutely hate running. It's not so much the grueling physical aspect, but it is just so boring to me. It's a pointless activity, unless you do it for sport or you're trying to lose weight or something like that. A lot of people have been asking what exactly happened to me. It's been quite a number of months now, but what I remember from this experience is honestly pretty fresh and vivid in my mind, given the circumstances. Sorry it's so long, but you people wanted details. You can choose to believe me or not, but this is what happened. It was about halfway through the track season of my junior year, and I was just ready for it to be over. Like I said earlier, I hate running. My intentions at the start of the season were to drop a few pounds and hang out with friends, but I had already lost almost 15 pounds in most of my friends at this point. The first week that track began, my two closest friends along with the girl I loved and two of her friends were in the car on the highway when they had a head-on collision with a drunk driver. Her two friends both survived, along with my best friend who I hear is just now able to walk again. My other good friend and my girlfriend, we'll call her Lena, weren't as lucky. This might sound selfish or heartless, but damn it, I wish her friend were taken instead of her. I refuse to go into detail about their deaths, but that's all you need to know for now. After they passed away, I was completely devastated, as you would expect. Lena and I were very serious, or as serious as a high school relationship could be. We had been together for a little over 2 years, and there wasn't a doubt in my mind that I would marry her after we graduated. I was utterly in love with her. I never sunk to a state of insanity, but I entered a massive state of depression, and I pretty much cut off all communication with any of my other friends, and even my friend that was in the hospital from the crash. I feel horrible for never visiting him, but I just didn't want to accept what had happened. I still don't. I don't want you to think I'm insane, because I'm not. Obviously, I'm sane enough to write this, and I'm sane enough to come to the realization that I was depressed, which is normal behavior for what I experienced. The way things happened are confusing, and the way that I present this story is the best way I know how to, showing you all exactly what was running through my mind. I swear to God I'm not insane. The rain was beating heavily against the already muddy ground, transforming the dirt path into a massive slide. I had to be careful with every step as I stomped down the momentarily steep slope. My feet were sliding in every direction with each forward motion. It was what seemed to be a horrible day for a run, but not for me. I only enjoyed running when it was in the rain. It was exhilarating. I was stumbling quite uncontrollably down the trail, following the rest of the runners I was with. My momentum combined with inertia and the poor weather created an unstoppable force that couldn't be slowed down. Unless, of course, I were to trip and faceplant into the mud. I did. I lay motionless for a few moments before I realized that I needed to get up and keep close to the group. These woods were incredibly dense, and the trail parted many different ways more than once throughout. This was certainly not an ideal time to be lost. My focus instantly switched from getting all the mud off my face to catching up with the rest of the runners. I ran distance, and on this day in particular, we were running through the massive forest and trail system right behind our school. We technically weren't permitted to run back there, but it was our only option when we need to run a lot of hills in our workout. Nothing could really go wrong, anyway. I sprinted forward for a minute or so when I came to a part where the trail continued to go straight, where you could make a sharp left. Of course, I thought there had to be a turn right now. I stopped and thought which way I would go if I were a group of teenage boys, so I chose to go straight. I picked up my sprint again and held it for no longer than 90 seconds before I had to catch my breath. I slowed down enough to breathe, but my survival instincts told me I needed to find my group. I couldn't figure out why they hadn't turned around to come back and look for me. They had to have noticed I was gone by now. They weren't leaving me on purpose, were they? No, I told myself they weren't. That's insane, they wouldn't do that. The rain was pouring harder and harder as I frantically searched for my team. Time was passing, and I knew the run would be over soon. I kept searching long after I knew they were gone, and there was no hope of finding them. I had lost track of time, and I didn't bring a watch or phone or anything. I couldn't use the sun to judge the time because I had no idea where it was hidden behind the ominous clouds. I wasn't familiar with these trails at all, and the panic really set in when I realized how lost I was. I continued running for what seemed like hours on end. Brutal exhaustion possessed my body by now, and the temperature seemed to drop at least 20 degrees. I had to get out of here. The trail was never ending. I swear to God, I ran down that trail for 20 miles. Haven't I been here already? This is the 4th time I've seen that tree. I'm starving. I need rest. It's at least 10. My mom is going to kill me. This is the 5th time I've seen that fucking tree. Why is no one searching for me? My legs couldn't take anymore. I had to stop. I collapsed into the soft, yet freezing embrace of the mud. In that moment, I was ready to die. I was losing my mind. There was no way that someone hadn't come searching for me already. How had I not found the edge of the forest by now? I had given myself to nature. If I had died right there, I would have been just fine. As I was drifting in and out of consciousness, I heard a noise that was getting increasingly louder. Not louder, exactly, but closer. Someone is coming for me. They found me. Hey, I'm over here. Help me, I'm right here. I mustered up enough energy to yell. I quickly realized that no one was there. No one was going to help me. It was just a dog. It was a big dog. Seriously, it was the biggest fucking dog I had ever seen in my entire life. You know those terrifying dogs that are as big as horses? This was bigger than those. The dog's incessant barking was muffled by the rain pounding in my ear, which had made me numb to most noise at this point. I knew that I was in danger as I heard the barking draw nearer and nearer. I jumped to my feet as the dog approached me, ready to fight for my life. To my surprise, the dog simply stopped about 10 feet from me and began barking even more rapidly. It didn't appear to want to attack me, but I knew that this was a very clear and present danger. I needed to make my move. I knew I didn't have nearly enough energy to outrun this horse/dog creature. So I scanned the ground for any sort of tree limb or weapon. The ground was pretty clear other than inch-thick mud covering all of the green grass and the dirt path. I was standing in the middle of a forest, and there weren't any sticks on the ground. This just was not my day. I looked up, and the rain drilled into my eyeballs as I stared into the night sky. The moon was almost full, and it illuminated the area surprisingly well through the looming trees overhead. I wiped my eyes clear of the rain and faced the dog. Its blurred visage began creeping towards me slowly, and I knew I had to attack. I lunged at it with whatever force I had within me and elbowed it right in the neck. I gave it a couple of quick blows to the head and jumped off to begin running away. It barked and whimpered furiously from behind me as I headed deeper into the forest. My running continued for a few minutes, but I had no energy. I hadn't eaten in about 8 hours, and I knew it must have been close to midnight by now. The running had taken its toll on my body, and I needed rest. I would have done anything to be home in bed. Fortunately, the rain was calming down quite significantly at this point. There was only a slight drizzle coming from the calm sky. I came to a clearing in the forest. I haven't been here before, I thought. The clearing was empty except for a big tree stump in the middle. There were no trees inside of the massive, empty circle of land, but trees surrounded the whole area. The moonlight reflected perfectly through the sky onto the stump in the very center. Words can't explain how beautiful this sight was. It was truly a majestic scene. It was exactly how you would imagine, like something in a movie. I walked towards the center slowly, but I stopped because I knew I must be hallucinating. There was no way this was real. It was all too perfect. I heard something shuffle around in the trees. A bright red bird emerged and landed delicately on the tree stump. I felt a lump in my throat. Instantly, memories came flooding back to me. Oh, so you're saying you could beat me? I know I could beat you. Don't you remember that time on New Year's? We didn't get to finish the game, but I was beating you so bad. Oh, whatever. That doesn't count. I hardly even remember it. I was too occupied by your drunk grandmother. Don't bring that sweet lady into this. I don't want to hear your excuses. We were always bickering about stupid stuff. It was never entirely serious, and the conversation always contained laughter and playful flirtation. That's what I loved about Lena. She could take a joke. I could say something slightly insulting to her, and she would return with something twice as mean. She was even more sarcastic than myself, which is difficult to find. The air was fresh, and the sun had just begun to set. It was the end to a perfect day together at the park where we had a picnic and made each other play on the children's playground that was much too small for teenagers. There was a big hill that overlooked the entire area, and that's where we were to watch the sunset. A single, large oak tree rested above us as we hoarded its shade. Lena was leaned up against me, resting softly as our breathing patterns seemed to match to each other. A rustle was heard in the tree above us, and a flash of red darted towards the ground a couple feet from us. Oh, don't scare it, Lena said in a somewhat hushed tone. Look how beautiful it is. It was a little red bird with black wings and tail. It's a scarlet tanager, she exclaimed. I couldn't help but let out a laugh. Why do you even know that? You nerd, I replied playfully. She hit me. I guess I deserve that. She laughed too, though, reassuring me that her feelings weren't hurt. Shut up. You know, I got put in that nature class this year on accident, she said defensively. It's a beautiful creature, and I've actually found a new appreciation for nature recently. Gosh, Lena, sorry. I never knew you were such a hippie. She laughed even harder at that one and hit me again. I love that girl. I snapped back into reality, and my moment of happiness was instantly washed away. I had been stuck in the forest for hours now, with no sign of help. The tanager flew away, and I was only left with the memory. I was destroyed, physically and emotionally. I saw something on the other side of the clearing. It was barely moving between some trees, slowly. My first thought was that it was just an animal, and I almost shrugged it off, but it seemed to be wearing some sort of robe. I walked even closer, and I stopped beside the tree stump, and I began to make out the image of a person. They were wearing what appeared to be a white dress, and I was taken back by why someone was in the forest wearing a dress. My heart jumped at the sight of another human being, though, and I began to rush forward. I stopped dead in my tracks when I realized it was Lena. She turned around, and her long brown hair glistened down over the white of her dress. I recognized those bright green eyes instantly. She stared at me for a second and smiled, but then she started walking away. I couldn't let her get away. My bewilderment and excitement turned my dead energy into pure adrenaline. My only goal was to catch up to her. I wanted to hold her and never let her go. I used whatever energy remained to sprint back into the trees after her. Why was she running away? Didn't she want to be with me too? Maybe she hated me. Maybe she hated me. No, she couldn't hate me. She loves me. She loves me, right? Lena, I yelled as I ran. She didn't stop. I couldn't give up. She couldn't get away. She was so fast. She was outrunning me. She was barely in my sight enough for me to continue following her. My legs were just about to give out when I could feel my body ready to collapse again. Maybe I was already dead. I died long ago when I fell down, and this was my hell. I was trapped here forever. I could see something bright in the distance. It was shining through the trees and around Lena's body until I couldn't see her anymore because the lights were making me so dizzy. I was running as fast as I could until I broke through that last line of trees. Cop cars, bright lights, dark figures. There were 3 police cars and a couple other cars along with an ambulance scattered around the lot. I recognized the place as my school parking lot. I was on the very edge where it met part of the forest. "There he is," someone yelled. My vision was still slightly blurred as I tried to make out their faces. It was my mom. My mom and 2 other police officers were rushing toward me. My baby, I'm so glad you're safe," my mom muttered through tears as she embraced me. Her embrace was the only thing keeping me from hitting the ground. One of the police officers called into his radio that they found me and the search was off. "Let's get you to the paramedics," the taller officer said. They helped me over to the back of the ambulance where another officer was standing. He had bandages and bruises on his face. "Well, look who it is," he said to me in a sarcastic tone. "You sure knocked me good." "What do you mean?" I managed to ask. "You got a couple good hits on my face when I found you out there yesterday. Almost knocked me clear out." My heart skipped a beat. Yesterday? I thought. My mind was racing. I never saw anyone out there. I didn't hit anyone. "Yeah, I found you and told you to come with me, but you attacked me. I didn't mean to scare you. I was just trying to bring you to safety," he told me. "The dog. I must have been hallucinating." "What did you mean by yesterday?" "I was only lost for a couple hours. During practice, I was running with the rest of the team out there when I got separated. I told them, confused. My mom and the officers all looked at each other, bewildered. My mom spoke up. "Sweetheart, you were missing for over 2 days. The track season ended last month. You weren't running with anyone. 2 days. There's no way I was gone for that long. I know the track season wasn't over. I even talked to the guys before we ran. My heart was beating very frantically, and as I understand, I had a really bad panic attack and my body shut down. I was starving and exhausted from apparently being without food and rest for 2 days. I passed out. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed. My sight was still blurry, and it took a moment to readjust. I looked at the clock, and it made out 11 something through my blurry vision. After my eyes focused, I glanced over at my windowsill, refreshed to see some sunlight. A red tanager was looking at me through my window. Echoes of the Luminance. I remember the first time I witnessed that gruesome sight right in front of me. It had been all over the news for the past week, but until that moment, I was still unable to take any of the story seriously. I guess that's what happens in a world where the media exaggerates every little story they encounter to pull in more dull-minded viewers. It first started in the icy wastelands of Russia back in 2012. Hikers passing through on their travels discovered bodies half buried in the snow, their abdomens mutilated and the occasional limb removed, only to be found a few meters from the body. At first, these finds were put down to wild animals desperately searching for food in the lifeless tundra. They barely even made news on Russian broadcasting networks. Only the locals to the areas, of which there are few in such a desolate place, really heard the stories. It's strange, now that I think about it. The attacks have been happening all through late December, and simply went unreported until February, when things became more severe. Heck, maybe those doomsday lunatics were onto something after all, and no one noticed. As the days went on after the initial attacks, panic in the Russian wilderness began to spread as more bodies were found in the wild, remains scattered in the snow, and yet an even larger amount of people became reported as missing. It wasn't until mid-January that the first body was discovered in a public area. In a small rural town, sitting on the edge of the wastes, 2 disfigured bodies were discovered by a few poor citizens on their way to work, their limbs scattered all over the streets. This was the first case that managed to work its way into the mainstream media outlets. Everybody just dismissed it as a murder case, the sort that you hear about in foreign countries all the time. What kept my attention was something the autopsy reports discovered. The murder hadn't even happened at night. It seemed to have happened only an hour before the first poor soul discovered the freshly broken body. I mentally gagged at the thought of finding a body strewn across the floor, still bleeding. As the days went on, more and more reports came in of bodies being found in small villages across Russia, completely destroyed and with no clue as to the cause. And just like the original, all of them had happened in broad daylight, but with no witnesses to recall how it happened. It was February when the first big incident occurred. I remember it distinctly because it happened to be my birthday. Breaking news all over the world, insane stories coming from Russia. It seemed impossible to believe at first. The anchorman on TV spoke quickly in an urgent voice of barricades being erected in Moscow as people from outside ran screaming to its walls, begging to be let in. What he said next made my heart jump. People in cities and towns all over Moscow were being eviscerated in plain daylight. The attacker? Nothing. People were being cut to ribbons, in their homes, in the streets, all over Russia, in plain daylight, but there was no visible attacker. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. It had to be a hoax. It didn't make any sense. However, my curiosity overpowered me. I had to see it for myself. I loaded up my laptop and began my trawl of some of the darker parts of the web, in search of videos of the insane claims. As it turned out, there were thousands of videos on the subject, so I clicked on a random one. It was being filmed from a rooftop and involved frightened people of all ages, running through the streets in a panic with nothing noticeable chasing them. I remember moving to click another link after thinking nothing would happen, when suddenly a random man in the group seemed to scream and then explode. It just happened. There was no warning, no sign of attack. The man wasn't even at the back of the group. It seemed as though fate had picked a random person and just decided he would die there and then. I sat in shock as the video ended abruptly. Moving the mouse up again, I clicked on another video. This one was being filmed from behind a barricade to hold back fleeing citizens. I guess that was their idea of controlling the population. Various men in military uniforms lined the barricade with large rifles, looking on at the crying, begging people with little emotion. Then out of nowhere, one of the women at the front of the crowd was ripped apart by the air and thrown across the military's front line. I gagged a little at the sight, despite having been reinforced against this sort of thing. In a panicked response, the soldiers sprayed their guns at the point of the attack, as if trying to hit the invisible assailant. But their bullets went through the space and took out the civilians behind the remains. People scattered as the soldiers unloaded their rounds into the crowd, and then, spontaneously, one of the soldiers burst apart. The cameraman seemed to panic at this point, and the feed went dead. My mind was struggling to get to grips with itself. I honestly didn't know what to think. I always imagined myself in these situations before, acting like I was in a movie, analyzing every mystery and saving the day by solving it. But this just made no sense. I was scared. The next day, Russia entered lockdown, as did many other countries, in hopes of keeping this ghostly threat out of their nations. News from Russia dropped as a result. It was completely cut off from the rest of the world, and we could only hope they were okay. And then life continued. Of course, people talked of it, but everyone just seemed to stop fearing it. In reality, it seems we were just trying to put it behind us because of our fear. Humans fear what they don't understand, so it seems not thinking about it was a suitable way of combating that fear. It wouldn't last. The year moved on and days became longer. And then that day came, the one I wish I could forget. It was a bright day in the middle of May, and I was out with a group of friends celebrating the completion of another year at university. We were walking and laughing to the in-jokes we had created over the last year, trying to remember them all before we retreated to our hometowns. At one point, we stopped while a few of our party went to buy food from a shop, and I began talking to my closest friend, Ryan. We were midway into a conversation about what game to play online next, And then, it was so abrupt, just like in the videos. He was halfway through a word and his body just burst into pieces. Blood and entrails splattered across my body. I stumbled back in horror as my mind processed what had just happened. Around me, people ran away from the area, screaming for help, but I barely noticed. Where my best friend once stood was now just a bloody mess, and my mind was never given a chance to prepare itself. I dropped to my knees and vomited on the floor, crying. It was at least 15 minutes before I was able to take control of myself again and actually get up. By that point, the police had arrived and were telling me to remain still, as if they thought I had done this unspeakable act. I remember sitting in that gloomy room, barely being able to answer any questions the investigators had for me, simply replying with a nod or shake of the head. They told me that this wasn't the only place it had happened. In fact, it had become a worldwide pandemic. The brief period of peace had just been the calm before the storm. What we thought was sealed in Russia was now everywhere, and it wasn't even spreading from a single point as it had been at the start. It was a full-scale attack. Nowhere was safe. We were evacuated to military bases and defense points in hopes of holding back this invisible invasion. But we all knew it was no use. My family and I were taken to a military installation in the countryside where we stayed for a month. No contact with the outside world was permitted in fear of giving our location away to the creatures. A single analog TV was our only view of the outside world. It seemed a few rogue pirate news stations had popped up to keep those locked away, up to date with current events. The quality was terrible, but in a time like that, it was better than nothing. We heard reports of strange lights being sighted, not in the sky, but closer to the ground. We were told of countries falling one by one, their entire populations being wiped out. There was also one report of scientists discovering something in the sky. The report said that they couldn't see it, but whatever it was giving out a lot of energy, and it was big. The size of a small moon, in fact. Images of Russia came in from aerial photographs. Moscow was ablaze, towering buildings reduced to rubble, and in their remains shook large shimmering waves of fire. A close-up of the streets showed roads bathed in red with human remains dotted around in several areas. The video feed switched to another aerial clip of a gigantic crater. The host went on to describe the location as a former nuclear power plant that had entered a meltdown 2 months ago due to no one controlling it. At the end of the clip, the camera quickly moved upwards to focus on a second helicopter that was now spinning out of control. Against the window, flashes of that all-too familiar red color could be seen as the video suddenly cut out. The last broadcast on that channel was the most disturbing. We switched the TV on to find the man in tears with streaks of blood down his face. He looked extremely scared and spoke with a weak, trembling voice. "Oh God, they've come. The angels have come for me. Lord, they've taken everyone here, and now it's my turn. Judgment Day is here, loyal viewers. There's nothing left for me on this earth anymore, but for those who might be left, I think I know how to survive against them." He let out a loud, sharp laugh. Just my luck, hey? To find out when it's too late. All you have to do is stay out of the... His sentence was cut off by a scream as his body was ripped in two, right before our eyes. The channel didn't shut off, though. It's still there, in fact, but all you see now is the decaying corpse of an insane man, one of his eyes limply staring at you through the camera lens. Since then, there were no more accessible channels. Our last view of the outside world was gone. It didn't really matter anymore to us. We were a small group of people left amongst what must have been less than 1 million humans on the earth. The what and where was no longer our concern. For a while, everything was quiet. The soldiers kept us in line. We fed off of what rations the base had. We stuck to strict curfews and attempted to socialize and keep ourselves entertained in our new little personal world. We were somehow quite content with our new lives, with no outside world to bother us. No responsibilities or concerns for anything but our little community. On top of that, The lack of news about outside events allowed us to almost forget what had been happening. Until one night at the end of August, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of a scream. I was on the floor of a large room containing hundreds of other sleeping evacuees. The realization still startled me every time I woke up, even though I had been sleeping in these conditions for the past month. My vision was blurred somewhat as I attempted to focus on my surroundings, and my body appeared to be mildly damp and slightly sticky. I didn't think much of it. I had had many restless nights here, and we were in a cramped, humid bunker. On the far side of the room, there were two dim lights creeping in through the doorways. Someone must have left the light on in the corridor, I thought to myself. It was rather puzzling. The thoroughness of the soldiers here would have never allowed something like this. All lights had to be switched off at 8 p.m., and they checked every night. Surely by now, a guard would have found this and switched it off again. Maybe it was one of them doing a midnight check on us all. That's when I noticed something odd. One of the lights was moving. Not moving behind the doorway, but it seemed as if the doorway itself was moving. It drifted silently across, closing in on the other door. At first, I thought it must be a soldier with a torch. I winced and rubbed my eyes, attempting to focus on the object. Then, just as it merged with the light of the door, I managed to focus on what seemed impossible. It had the shape of a tall, disturbingly thin humanoid, but where the body should be, there was nothing. No abdomen, no limbs, no head. The outline of the mysterious being seemed to just drift across the wall in an area of light. The first thought that entered my mind was inverted shadow. I know it sounds crazy, but it was as if, instead of creating a shadowy outline in a lit room, something was creating a bright outline in a dark room. Unfortunately, this was the best view I could get of the entity, as it seemed to literally merge with the light from the doorway and disappear. My body was frozen at the sight, and out of fear, I chose to lay down and try to get to sleep again, hoping that whatever it was, it wouldn't notice me. It was another long, restless night. I woke up at 8 a.m. Light peered through the small slits in the top of the bunker and kept the room bright enough to see wall to wall in the giant reinforced mass of cement. I wish I hadn't seen it, though. Blood covered the walls. Where once had been sleeping bodies, now laid the remains of a silent massacre. What I thought had been my own sweat from the night before turned out to be the remains of my parents who had once slept beside me. I screamed. Not a single person was spared that night. Well, save for myself. Walking through the base, it seemed these things had made short work of every human on site, and yet, the gates still remained firmly shut. Guards posted on the watch point had their destroyed bodies hanging over the rails. It was quiet. I sat in the middle of that compound, alone, sobbing to myself. I was alone in the world. These things had killed everyone I knew and loved, and I was lost. I didn't know what to do. I slept in that compound for 3 days until I saw him again. That man of light, eerily and slowly drifting through the darkness and merging with the light once again. This time, I could have sworn he noticed me. He stopped and turned till he was head-on with me and just stared at me. I couldn't move, my body just refused to listen, and then the being left. I don't know why they keep sparing me. Is it for amusement? Because they pity me? Or something more? I just can't get my head around any of it. After that night, I took as many supplies from the base as I could and journeyed towards the nearest village, which is where I now reside. I managed to find a house with a basement and lock myself in there with the supplies. But I never turned the light on anymore. For 3 weeks, I have been living in total darkness. Not because I think they'll find me, but I think I know what these things are now. I once read a science fiction book that detailed a possible route a species may take in its evolutionary course. This species would evolve beyond the simple realm of the physical and become a being of pure energy. When a species would reach this point, it would obtain near-omniscient knowledge and have no care for life or death anymore. What the intentions of such a hyper-powerful species would be are impossible to predict, since their minds are so much more advanced than ours. It seems in our universe, a species has gotten there before us. They are the light. Where we always feared an alien species abducting us in the middle of the night, it turns out that darkness is our only safety from the real threat. The beings of light. 2 days ago, the second star appeared, a red giant that now sits opposite our sun, bathing both halves of the earth in light. And now there is no longer night in this world. There is no place to hide on the outside. I don't know what they want with our planet or why they chose to kill us all, but I know this. They have killed everyone here. If you're out there, don't go into the light. Stick to the shadows if you want any chance of living. Darkness doesn't kill them, but it sure slows them down. There's a light coming from beneath the basement door. I have to go now. Good luck.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.